The war in Iran cracks within the MAGA movement and the electoral defeat of a close ally in Europe. Things are not going great for Donald Trump. The conflict has not only rattled the global economy, it's also alienating some of the president's most loyal supporters. Trump spat with the Pope, and an AI-generated image he posted and later deleted, seemingly portraying himself as Jesus Christ, has outraged religious voter groups. The president is risking the support of crucial parts of his base, raising questions over his political future. After Viktor Orbán's crushing election defeat, analysts are drawing parallels to his longtime ally in Hungary. And to the point, we ask, Trump's Iran trap, is the US president fueling his own downfall? Welcome to The Point. I'm Nicole Furley here in Berlin, and I'm pleased to introduce you to today's panel. I'm joined by Eric Kirschbaum. He's a freelance journalist and author and special correspondent for the LA Times. Malte Lehming, a journalist with the German newspaper Tagesspiegel and a longtime U.S. correspondent. And Wendelin von Bredow, senior Germany correspondent for The Economist. We appreciate you all joining us today. Now, Eric, I want to start talking about Donald Trump. He's never been afraid to upset anyone. Yet in recent weeks and days especially, we've seen him alienate or say and do things that have upset much of his loyal voter base. Has he lost touch with, the MAGA movement, those who brought him to power?
Yeah, it's a good question. That is the big question a lot of Americans are asking right now. I mean, he's had better weeks as president than this last week. Picking fights with the Pope is not really the smartest thing to do, especially when conservative voters, religious voters are the reason you're president. So who knows what's going on in Trump's head right now. He's a couple weeks, he'll be 80 years old in June. The speculation that he may have some mental issues is definitely growing. We had this before with Joe Biden. Who knows? But it doesn't make a lot of sense, really, because things are going well for some Americans. The tax cuts a year ago have triggered some economic growth that's been pretty okay. And people in America got big tax returns this week, $3,400 per person. And a big reason people get so much back on their income tax returns this year is because of the tax cuts that Trump and Congress passed last year. So you would think Trump would be talking about things like that this week, 6 months before the midterms, rather than getting into fights with the Pope, who's an American.
Getting into fights with the Pope and getting bogged down in a war in the Middle East. And that is just the latest chapter of him seemingly transporting the world into a permanent state of emergency. And that's been happening ever since he returned to the White House, hasn't it? So why do you think, Wendelin, is he doing this? What is he trying to achieve by just, alarming the world over and over every day? It seems to be another fight he's picking.
Well, he likes to keep people on edge, right? It keeps him in the news. That's sort of his strategy or his gut instinct. But I think on Iran, I think the war is a huge mistake. It will probably go down as the biggest mistake of his presidency. And he thought it would be a bit like Venezuela, in and out. He would come in, with overwhelming force, trigger regime change, and then he would be out and he would be seen as the great victor. And that didn't work out. And now he has to find a way to extract himself from this war that is really going wrong and not going his way.
Yeah. Malte, Trump's behavior has been seen as increasingly erratic. Eric hinted at it. There are doubts being raised over his mental state, his fitness to remain in office. There are some lawmakers who are talking about invoking the 25th Amendment. That's a very long shot. But how is that kind of discussion and that whole situation going down with the U.S.'s allies here in Europe?
That's an interesting question. He before the Iran war started, he said, "I don't need any partners." Then Europe said, "Okay, then we will not be on board." Then he said, "Oh, what you're not doing? You're leaving me in the lurch." So it very much depends on. He's always pretending he doesn't need anyone to do things. He's the boss, and the boss decides, and that's the image he cultivates. And the big question is, what will be the future of NATO? The NATO Chief Secretary Rutte has just visited him. He was not so optimistic after these talks about the future of NATO.
And he's a a Trump whisperer in a way, right? Mark Rutte and
one of
Trump.
the last Trump whisperers outside the USA. Yeah. And so, yeah, let's see what the future has in store for that.
Let's see what the future has in store for that. Eric, we've heard Trump repeatedly refer to himself as crazy. In your opinion, how much of a strategic move is this portrayal of himself as, an unpredictable madman in a way?
Well, he's been calling himself a madman for quite a while. Yeah. The madman strategy, this came from the Vietnam War era. Richard Nixon said the madman strategy, your opponent doesn't know what you're going to do. Trump likes to use that sometimes. He is unpredictable, and he does this with Putin and Ukraine sometimes. Who knows what's going on in his head right now? But I would disagree politely. I don't think Iran is quite the disaster. I think the jury is out. The U.S. has dominated, U.S. and Israel have dominated Iran. The Air Force is destroyed, the Navy is destroyed, and Trump has gone with a bit of a risky gamble here to close the strait entirely. And this is putting enormous economic pressure on Iran. And we're seeing indications Iran does want to negotiate. Iran would be interested in a deal that might end economic sanctions. And we see this in the financial markets this week. They've been rallying. There's a sense in the markets that this war may be over soon. And if it is over soon, and Iran rejoins as a normal nation and the economic sanctions are lifted, it could be a different game. I was fortunate enough to be in Iran in 2003 for 3 weeks after the earthquake for Reuters. And I was amazed back then how primitive the computers were, how backwards Iran was as an economy. 2003, I'm sure it's even worse now. So Iran does have enormous interest in having these sanctions lifted, becoming a normal nation, and Trump knows that. And this massive economic pressure that no more oil is being exported from Iran could lead to an agreement in Pakistan in the next few weeks. Who knows?
Well, I still think it's a disaster. Okay. Because if you think about, maybe Trump doesn't articulate things very clearly, but if you think about 3 goals the Americans could have possibly had with this war. Number 1, regime change, they didn't achieve. Number 2, destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities, they didn't achieve that. 3, maybe making the Middle East a more stable, prosperous place. Well, that certainly didn't happen. So if you think about these 3 overarching goals, he failed all 3.
But I think the nuclear threat is definitely diminished for the near term, for the next 5 or 10 years. And I think Iran is a threat.
Do we know that for certain, though?
No.
Because he's very vague, and he went in there on day 2, essentially saying, we already obliterated the program back last year. So where do we stand right now? What do we know about this war he's actually achieved?
We're sitting here in Berlin and in Germany. There's a lot of skepticism about Trump and about Iran, but I think Iran's nuclear threat is a lot less than it was in February. And I think Iran's support for Hezbollah and Hamas is going to be gone now. So I wouldn't agree that Trump and the United States has lost everything they went into in this war. I think the jury's still out. And I think.
But the crucial question is, what do you do with more than 400 kilogram enriched uranium? This is the crucial question.
The Russians offer that they can take it in, right? That's a scenario.
Yes, the Iranians would not give up to that because that's the last bargaining chip they have in international relations. So this will be the crucial. If he managed to postpone any kind of more enrichment for, let's say, 10 or 20 years, that's close to the JCPOA, to the atomic treaty they had with Iran, which he cancelled as president. So all these ironic things are coming back right now to hurt him. So I can't see how he can really go away from Iran as the winner.
One of the things we've learned from this war is that Iran had the capability of sending ballistic missiles that could have hit Berlin. That was not really known before. So now we know that. Now we know Europe and Germany was also threatened by this. And that's why I don't understand why the Europeans, the Germans, don't celebrate at least a little bit that Iran's capability to attack Germany is knocked out for the next 5 or 10 years at least, maybe longer, maybe forever.
We're not sure about this. That's what the President Trump said after the first round of we obliterated everything in Iran. They are not able to do any more harm to us. And then they started another war and saying, yes, because I had the gut feeling that he was about to attack us.
They started this war because 20,000 Iranians were murdered in January by their own government. That's what got them into the war.
And yet, Donald Trump then a couple weeks later threatened to obliterate an entire civilization. And I want to get into that in a second. Let's get our viewers caught up with the events of the past 4 or 5 weeks, because Donald Trump reportedly found out that the talks in Islamabad had broken down while he was attending a UFC event in Miami. Now he says he doesn't care if they even resume. We hear there are back-channel talks still taking place. A majority of Americans do want this war to end. Let's look at the campaign so far.
Trump wants to immortalize himself with a gigantic triumphal arch in Washington. He sees himself victorious, also in the war against Iran that the USA started on February 28th.
We've beaten and completely decimated Iran. They are decimated, both militarily and economically and in every other way. And
with a little more time, we can easily open the Hormuz Strait, take the oil, and make a fortune. Open the strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell.
they're animals. And we have to stop them, and we can't let them have a nuclear weapon. Very simple.
A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. A big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. They've had enough.
Regardless what happens, we win. We've totally defeated that country.
But do his politics serve the American people?
You had a bit of a chuckle here right now after hearing some of the things that the president said. One day it's apocalypse, the next day it's world peace. Is this war the epitome of Trump's erratic foreign policy?
I'd say so. I mean, from what we've seen, Venezuela, was swift and was pretty successful for Trump. But this one is erratic, and people always think, I don't even think he has a strategy. He thought this would be fast. He was pushed by Netanyahu to do this, and he thought it would be easier and much easier to be successful, and it's proven not to be the case.
Eric, there were warnings about attacking Iran, even from within Trump's inner circle. Why did he ignore the risks and go ahead with it anyway?
Well, I think Vinland's right that there's a lot of speculation that Venezuela went so well, 2.5 hours in and out, no casualties, and maybe he thought this could happen again. And I think he was also deeply bothered by the murder of 20,000 Iranians by their own government, and that upset Trump. And he thought this would be easier than it is. And again, I think the jury's still out. I think the war is still going on. I don't think we should predict the outcome until we know how this is going to play out. But Trump's comments, by the way, are embarrassing. I think even Trump supporters were embarrassed by some of the things he said, the 4-letter words he was using. This is the first time I checked, the first time an American president has ever on the record used the F word, which I think is outrageous. And I think most Americans are too. And I think he's only losing support among his ardent supporters by sounding so ridiculous and threatening to stamp out a civilization. I think almost everybody thinks he just went too far.
Yeah, but I think it also shows under how much pressure he is, right? That he is going so far that he is,
Right.
it's showing the strain. It's not that he's completely untouched by what is a very dangerous gamble he's playing at the moment.
Yeah. Malte, he mentioned some of Trump's most ardent supporters. We've seen Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson attack him over how this war is being fought. Has the Iran war become the trap that Donald Trump always accused his predecessors of walking into?
I think yes. Many of his followers follow the slogan America First. They dislike any engagement in global affairs. He promised that he will never start wars in the Middle East and endless wars, and he has to end all these endless wars. He failed in Gaza, he failed in Ukraine. He's now about to fail in Iran as well. And all these places where these things are taking place is showing that he doesn't care about America first. He cares about the world first. And this brings ire to a lot of his constituency.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the economic fallout, of course. I think if you've been to a gas station in recent weeks, we've all seen it. The markets are rattled by what's happening, especially in the Strait of Hormuz. And that is something we've seen Trump kind of use as a motivator to change policy in the past, right? It's become known as taco. Trump always chickens out. Whenever the markets respond negatively to something that he does, he kind of reverses course. Can he do that in this case, or is he in too deep?
No, I mean, he certainly not very quickly, right? And affordability has been an issue for a while. It's not only with the Iran war. You know, Americans are really struggling to make ends meet. Many Americans do, even though he's cutting taxes, whatever. It's just that everything has become much more expensive in recent years. And gas, I mean, petrol is so important in this huge country where people really do have to drive to work. There is not a public transport system in many cities comparable to what we have here. So I think it's even more symbolic, more important than we Europeans realize, you know, how much the gas price is sort of emblematic for everything else that's going on.
Eric, I want to touch on the Pope again. You mentioned it earlier. So there's a spat with the Pope. There is the picture seemingly depicting Trump as Jesus Christ. He later said it was him as a doctor. Then there's a profanity-laden post on Easter Sunday, of all days. Catholics make up a fourth of voters in the U.S. Can Donald Trump afford to alienate them, you know, at a time when Democrats are looking to flip the House?
Not really, not at all, especially because Catholics did play an important role in his win last year, 2 years ago, because 55% of the Catholics in America did support Trump compared to 40% for Harris. So they are an important voter bloc, and the religious voters have been very supportive of Trump because he delivered on his promise to change the shape of the Supreme Court. So they made abortion a crime in a lot of states. So they do like him, and that's the most important thing for a lot of voters. But he is definitely testing the levels of their support by going after the Pope. The Pope, an American Pope, the first time ever, and Trump is picking a fight with him, saying he's not tough on crime. It's just so absurd. I mean, this is almost like a Saturday Night Live show. It's almost a comedy. It's just so hard to believe.
And his attacks on the Pope, Malta, have also strained relations with Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. Is the way he's conducting politics in these past weeks, days, maybe because he's pressured into a corner, as Vendelin said, is this threatening to also alienate his allies in Europe?
How many does he have, allies in Europe? There is the president of the Prime Minister of Finland. It used to be Meloni in Italy, and it used to be Orbán in Hungary. So I can only count 3.
Merckx in Germany used to be an ally.
Out of 27 in the European Union. So it doesn't take much to alienate these 3 as well. But what he said is, we don't need partners for this war. And then the partners left him in the lurch. And then he said, oh, they leave me in the lurch. I'm thinking about quitting NATO and all these things.
But also, I mean, interesting to mention that he never formally requested aid in the Strait of Hormuz,
Right. But he is an expert in posing as somebody who can do everything he likes because he is the boss. There's the famous expression when he, in the beginning of his career, saying, "I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nothing will happen to me." And so this shows again with the Jesus AI picture, is that I can do that. I can do that, and all the liberal press, the establishment, they can't do me any harm because I'm the boss. I can allow myself to do that.
But it's true, though. He gets away with a lot of this in the United States because people don't take him that seriously. They don't take him literally. They take him serious, but not literally. And this is the problem people in Europe and around the world make. They take him too serious. When he's doing things like this,
maybe the
he's not
opposite
being
is true.
serious.
The problem is that Americans don't take him seriously.
That's another issue.
If he's threatening with genocide and nothing else is destroying a civilization, this is the threat with genocide. If you don't take him literally, you can be in a lot of trouble after that.
And we're all journalists here. We know how, what the weight of a word is. I want to look at one of Donald Trump's most important allies here in the EU. You mentioned him. Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán. He is on his way out. In many ways, he taught Trump how to reshape the state and turned Hungary into a beacon of the populist far right around the globe. Now he suffered a resounding election defeat.
Viktor Orbán and Donald Trump. The US president considered the long-serving Hungarian prime minister a role model because of his concept of an illiberal democracy, weakened media, hollowed-out courts and strict isolation. Orbán's approach became the ideological blueprint for the MAGA movement. Just before the elections, Trump sent Vice President J.D. Vance to Budapest to demonstrate his allegiance to Orbán.
I admire what you are fighting for. You're fighting for your freedom, you're fighting for your sovereignty, and I am here because President Trump and I wish for your success, and we are fighting right here with you.
Instead, Petr Magyar emerged as the winner, gaining support with an anti-corruption platform and domestic policy issues such as the state of the economy, as well as a pro-EU course. Orbán's defeat after 16 years in power means Trump has lost his closest ally in Europe. What conclusions will Trump draw from this defeat?
Bendelin, you were in Hungary twice in the run-up to this election. What mistakes did you see Orbán make that Trump might be repeating right now?
Well, mistake number one, he underestimated his opponent, right, who was relatively new on the scene. He's a former Fidesz member, and he just, for months or even for the entire last year, he didn't think he could really seriously challenge him. That's number one. And number two, I think he also underestimated how fed up Hungarians were with the corruption, with the poor state of the economy, with all these things. And I think Trump should look closely at Hungary because, you know, he is a populist leader who is also very charismatic, who had a very loyal followership, a bit like Trump has, but who was voted out of the office and resoundingly. I mean, the victory, it was a landslide victory. They now have a 2/3 majority in parliament. TISA has the opponents. So this, I think, Orbán, certainly last year, he would never, even until the end, he thought he could still win. And actually many Hungarians, they always thought, well, maybe there's a little trick that he'll pull and then he will stay.
Yeah. Eric, what lessons do you see in Viktor Orbán's defeat for Donald Trump? What lessons do you think he sees?
I think it was for the world or Europe, it's a huge victory for democracy. I know in Germany, people are always worried about democracy and Trump is changing the levers of power and packing the courts, things like that. But at the end of the day, the voters decided and the democracy overcame all the hurdles that Orbán threw in there. And I think the same thing's going to happen in the United States. I think democracy is very safe and sound in the United States. The media works, the courts work. Congress will one day probably kick back into action, maybe in November, if there's a change from the Democrats taking control. The other lesson, I think, is for the Democrats, really importantly, is have candidates who are electable for conservative voters as well. In Hungary, it was a very conservative candidate who avoided LGBT issues, who avoided controversial things, and stayed on the center right of the spectrum, and that seemed to work very well. And I think if the United States, if the Democrats are able to find a candidate or candidates who can reach those Midwestern voters like Bill Clinton and Obama, Biden, those conservative Democrats will probably have a much better chance of winning back the White House in 2028.
Yeah.
The interesting just about Hungary, the election was free but not fair. Yeah. So it was really tilted in Orbán's favor, you know, because he controls the media, because he gerrymandered the electoral system, and still, you know, TISA won this overwhelming victory. And in the States, of course, the media is not in the hands of the opposition. So in the States, it's a bit of a different moment, but it is an important lesson for Trump. Yeah.
And he could learn something else: to concede. Because that's what Orbán did.
Yeah. Surprisingly so, very early in the night.
And very early at night. Gracefully, right? It was almost a graceful
And we still have an American president who doesn't concede until now that he lost an election, which he did. So maybe that's something he should learn. And Budapest was always a symbol in America because all the conservative conferences were happening in Budapest. It was a very huge symbol for the MAGA movement.
And think tanks sponsored, you know, by the Hungarian government, very pro-MAGA think tanks. They all still exist, the Danube Institute and so forth.
So it's for the disadvantage of two leaders, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, because Orbán was a Putin man as well.
We're almost at the end. I have one last question for you, Eric. Is this, what we're seeing, just a bad couple of weeks for Donald Trump, or is it a structural unraveling of his political experiment?
That's a great question. I mean, things in the United States change so quickly. That's why it's hard to make long-term forecasts. But I think it's definitely some bad weeks, and it could be the beginning, a beacon of things, a harbinger of things worse to come. But maybe not. I mean, the war might end. It might be a pretty good outcome. Gas prices may fall again. The economy might pick up, and the Republicans might do all right in the midterm. So we'll have to see. Stay tuned. But it's going to be an exciting few months coming up.
Stay tuned. We will. Thank you so much to all our panelists. I want to thank you for this very, very lively discussion. To all of you watching, thanks so much for your company. I hope you took as much out of this panel as I did. If you're watching us on YouTube and have any questions, feedback, just want to say hi, leave us a comment. For now, though, from all of us here on To The Point, thank you so much for your company. Take care.